Do 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 do. Hello, happy Thursday. Welcome to Once Upon a Turkey Leg. I am Dean the Turkey Leg, sir, your host, and I hope you have had a great Thursday. Hope you've had a great week. We are here to read a different story for this stream. Normally, I read a Disney story on this stream. But today, we are looking at Halloween this weekend, and to commemorate that, I am reading today. It's The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and very excited to read this. I have been a fan of this story, the TV show, for a few years now, 4 or 5 years. And I watch it several times, usually in October. I watched it today, actually. I'll probably watch it at least one more time before the weekend is over. So I'm looking forward to reading that in a little bit. And also, I wanted to read, I have a list of 10 things that you may or may not have known about it's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. So this is off of the FW.com. 10 things that you didn't know, or maybe you did know. Hey Noah, happy Thursday. 10 things you didn't know about It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. So if you will indulge me. Hi Francisco, welcome in. If you will indulge me for a few minutes, I'm going to read through the list. Here's the introduction. A Charlie Brown Christmas might be the best known Peanuts television special, but the gang's Halloween special also cemented its place in television history. Sure, there wouldn't be a Halloween cartoon without the Christmas one, but there wouldn't be a Peanuts gang on television for more than 40 years without the Great Pumpkin. The story of the usually level-headed Linus waiting for the rise of the Great Pumpkin on Halloween night was a huge hit and a huge risk, since networks didn't even consider Halloween worthy of having its own TV special back in the 1960s. Not only has it aired almost every Halloween since its debut in 1966, but the story of the Great Pumpkin also secured the Peanuts' place in television history. Other parts of its storied history are equally entertaining and enlightening. Here are some things you might not know about It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Number one, the original Great Pumpkin story was actually about religion. Peanuts creator Charles Schulz's faith and beliefs often served as a launching point for his comic strip storylines and specials. A Halloween special might not seem the ideal place for a message about personal beliefs, but even the Great Pumpkin had something to say about faith and religion. Schulz's Great Pumpkin story got its start in his comic strip before finding a permanent place in popular culture on television. According to the book Shoals and Peanuts, a biography, Shoals received a rare complaint letter from a reader asserting that the Great Pumpkin was sacrilegious. He wrote a response agreeing with her assessment. He felt that the concept of believing in Santa Claus was just as ridiculous and sacrilegious as the Great Pumpkin, and he was trying to show this in the Great Pumpkin strips. Number 2. The Halloween special came to life because CBS wanted another blockbuster. The massive success of the Charlie Brown Christmas special and its subsequent special, Charlie Brown's All-Stars, gave animator Bill Melendez and director Lee Mendelsohn a lot of leeway with CBS to do another special. All they had to do was promise that it would be a blockbuster. Mendelsohn wrote in his book, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, the making of a television classic, that the CBS network executives wanted another Peanut special, but they also wanted a surefire hit. They didn't just want something they could air once a year. They wanted something they could air year after year to bigger and bigger audiences. Mendelsohn and Melendez had to promise their third special would be a blockbuster, even though they had no idea on the table for another Peanuts special. Number 3 is the success of the Halloween special ensured the future of the Peanuts specials. CBS wanted to be sure they would have another big hit on their hands. So let me just see if I can summarize this. I don't want to read the rest of the article word for word because it might get a little long, but basically they wanted, because the Great Pumpkin was popular, CBS was willing to fund future Peanuts projects, and so that ensured their success. So number 4 is really sweet. Literally, kids sent candy to Charlie Brown after it aired. This is kind of short, so I'll read this. Charlie Brown couldn't break his bad luck even on Halloween, when the gang goes trick-or-treating as Linus and Sally wait in the pumpkin patch for the Great Pumpkin's arrival. Charlie Brown somehow ends up getting a treat bag full of rocks. Mendelsohn said in an interview that some of the kids who watched felt so bad for poor Charlie Brown that they actually mailed candy and other gifts to CBS addressed to Charlie Brown. Number 5, it featured almost the entire original cast from A Charlie Brown Christmas. And I won't read the blurb on that, but basically the only change they had to make for the Great Pumpkin was the actress who played Lucy in a Charlie Brown Christmas, because she had gotten older and her voice had changed. And so other than that, it was all the same actors. So Sally's lines were almost ruined because of a loose tooth. So, of course, hiring children who could barely read to provide the voices for these characters presented a number of challenges. So Mendelsohn recalls on the Blu-ray documentary that Kathy Steinberg, the young actress who voiced Sally, almost had to be replaced. Just as they were nearing the end of her recording sessions, her mother called Mendelsohn one night in a panic because Kathy had a loose tooth and the gap in her teeth could cause a lisp in her voice that would sound different from the dialogue they had already recorded. The crew had to rush Kathy into the recording studio as soon as it opened to get the rest of her lines on tape. Mendelsohn said that Kathy's tooth fell out during her very last line. I can't lie, that is hilarious. Hurry up and get your lines. Your tooth is going to fall out. And you're going to sound like a completely different person. That one is hilarious. So, number 7. The first adult to record a voice for a Peanuts special was for Snoopy. So there weren't many noticeable changes between show's comic strip and the TV specials, except for one of its most animated characters. Snoopy didn't have a speaking role in the animated cartoons, except for a high-pitched gibberish voice. Melendez provided the voice for Snoopy and later for his birdie pal Woodstock, a casting decision that started during the recording for It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. He told his son Steve in an interview that they hired an actor to provide Snoopy's voice, but it didn't live up to his expectations. One of the sound engineers suggested to Melendez that he provided the voice for Snoopy, since he sounded best for the character. Melendez played the voice of Snoopy in the rest of his cartoons for almost 40 years. Number 8, Lucy is reading a TV guide featuring herself on the cover. I'm gonna have to rewatch it. I don't think I caught that. Melendez loved to add little in jokes for fans just to see what he could get away with in regards to budgeting and editing. Lucy actually appears in one scene twice early on in the Great Pumpkin special. After Linus writes his letter to the Great Pumpkin, he walks past Lucy while she is sitting. After Linus writes his letter to the Great Pumpkin, he walks past Lucy while she is sitting in front of the TV reading a TV Guide magazine. A split-second shot of the magazine features Lucy on the cover of the magazine. The idea of Snoopy the Flying Ace, this is number 9. The idea of Snoopy the Flying Ace came from Sparky's son, which is a nickname that Charles Schulz, a nickname of Charles Schulz. Snoopy evolved in the comic strip from a simple dog to a much more animated personality who begins to take on more adventurous roles and plot lines. He became the famous World War I flying ace fighter pilot in constant pursuit of the dreaded Red Baron in the comic strips, an idea that came from one of Schultz's sons, Monty, according to Mendelssohn's books. And then last, number 10, NASA took inspiration from Snoopy's flying ace. Snoopy didn't become the literal flying ace in the eyes of popular culture until he made his first appearance as such in the Great Pumpkin special. It featured Snoopy flying his doghouse and eventually crash landing behind enemy lines. Charlie Brown narrated the action because Snoopy didn't speak in the animated specials, even though Snoopy narrated his own adventures in the comic strip. Snoopy's flying ace became one of his most famous alter egos, both, both on screen and in newsprint. He even became a good luck charm for the NASA astronauts during the Apollo space missions and an icon for NASA safety. The crew of the Apollo 10 mission even brought a painting of the Flying Ace with them into space. So that was a little longer than I had intended, but hopefully that was interesting. A few 10 things you may or may not have known about It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. So I've showed this. This I've shown before on the stream. So I'm going to show it again before we get into the story. Thank you for putting up with that article. This is a greeting card I picked up at Publix. It's a pop-up card. On the front is, well, you see Linus and Sally and the silhouette of Snoopy. And then on the back we have these guys. There's a space here. So, might be wondering, it says a press here.
I hear the Great Pumpkin. There he is. There he is. It's the Great Pumpkin. He's rising up out of the pumpkin patch.
So that's a fun clip there. Hi, Dave. Happy Thursday. Welcome in. So that is that card. Picked it up at Publix. Very fun. Very, very, very fun card there. All right. Well, it is time to read It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. So, if you're in your pumpkin patches already and sincere and ready to go, we are going to go ahead and read It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Every fall, the leaves on the trees turn brown and fall off the branches. Pumpkins grow big and plump in their patches. The air grows cooler, and people start to think about their Halloween costumes. And every fall, Linus writes a very important letter. Dear Great Pumpkin, Linus writes, I'm looking forward to your arrival on Halloween night. I hope you will bring me lots of presents. Who are you writing to? Asks Charlie Brown. The Great Pumpkin, Linus replies. On Halloween night, the Great Pumpkin rises out of his pumpkin patch and flies through the air with his bag of toys for all the children. Linus's sister Lucy isn't happy that Linus is writing to the Great Pumpkin. You'll make me the laughing stock of the neighborhood, she complains. But Charlie Brown's sister, Sally, doesn't think Linus is crazy. She thinks Linus is wonderful. He is her sweet baboo. Wouldn't you like to sit with me in the pumpkin patch on Halloween night and wait for the Great Pumpkin? Linus asks. Sally is thrilled. I'd love to, she tells Linus. Later that day, Charlie Brown has a surprise waiting for him in the mailbox. I got an invitation to a Halloween party, he exclaims. Lucy thinks the invitation must be a mistake. There were two lists, she tells Charlie Brown, one to invite and one not to invite. Charlie Brown knows which list he was probably on, but he decides to go to the party anyway. On Halloween night, everyone is planning to go to the party, except Linus. My blockhead brother will be out in the pumpkin patch making his yearly fool of himself, Lucy grumbles. She can't understand why Linus would choose to miss out on all the fun that Halloween has to offer by sitting around in a pumpkin patch. Everyone puts on their costumes. Lucy is dressed as a witch. Charlie Brown is dressed as a ghost, but no one can tell what he is supposed to be because he had some trouble with the scissors. Sally is also dressed as a ghost, and so is Schroeder. They figured out how to use the scissors just fine. Pigpen is dressed as a ghost too. Everyone can tell which ghost he is because a cloud of dust surrounds him. Snoopy walks by, also. Snoopy walks by, also dressed in a costume. Who in the world is that? Asks Lucy. He's a World War I flying ace, Charlie Brown explains. Now I've seen everything, Lucy says. Lucy declares that everyone will go trick-or-treating first, and then go to the Halloween party. As they pass by the pumpkin patch, Linus sees them and gets excited, thinking they have come to wait with him. Have you come to sing pumpkin carols with me? He asks. You blockhead, Lucy yells at her brother. You're going to miss all the fun, just like last year. Oh, wait a minute. This one. Don't talk like that, Linus cries. The great pumpkin will come because I am in the most sincere pumpkin patch. Oh, good grief, Lucy exclaims as she marches off with her friends. It looks like no one wants to join Linus in the pumpkin patch to wait for the great pumpkin. Except, what about Sally? Sally is torn. She doesn't want to miss out on all the fun of trick-or-treating and a party, but Linus is her sweet baboo. What should she do? Sally runs back to the pumpkin patch. I'm so glad you came back, Linus tells her. You'll see the great pumpkin with your own eyes. Linus is positive that the Great Pumpkin will pick this patch. Why wouldn't he? The Great Pumpkin chooses the most sincere patch to visit every year. And how could a pumpkin patch be more sincere than this one? Sally hopes Linus is right. Meanwhile, the rest of the kids go trick-or-treating. Tricks or treats, money or eats, they yell at the first door. Everyone compares what they got. I got 5 pieces of candy, brags Lucy. I got a chocolate bar, exclaims Patty. I got a quarter, says Violet happily. I got a rock, says Charlie Brown sadly. And that happens at every door. All the other kids get wonderful treats like candy, gum, and popcorn balls. And Charlie Brown gets rocks. Lucy decides that they have done enough trick-or-treating and it's time to go to the party. After all, everyone has a bag filled to the brim with treats. Everyone except Charlie Brown. He has a bag full of rocks. On their way to the party, they pass by the pumpkin patch again. The kids laugh at Linus and Sally for waiting there instead of coming to the party. The Great Pumpkin will be here, Sally yells, defending Linus. After the kids walk by, Sally turns to Linus. All right, where is he? She asks. He'll be here, Linus assures her. I hope so, Sally replies. Think of all the fun we're missing. And the Halloween party is a lot of fun for everyone except Charlie Brown. At first, Charlie Brown thinks his night is looking up when the other kids ask him to be the model for the jack-o'-lantern. This sounds like a great honor. But then he realizes that being the model means having Violet draw a big pumpkin face on the back of his head. Meanwhile, in the pumpkin patch, right there, Sally is growing tired of waiting for the great pumpkin. If anyone had told me I'd be waiting in a pumpkin patch on Halloween night, I'd have said they were crazy, she complains. Just then, she and Linus hear a rumbling noise. They see a shadow emerging from the pumpkin patch. It's the great pumpkin, rising up out of the pumpkin patch, Linus yells. He is so excited to see the great pumpkin that he faints. But it isn't the great pumpkin after all. It is just the World War I flying ace on his way back from a very important mission. Linus wakes up and asks Sally what happened. I was robbed, howls Sally. Halloween is over and I missed it. She stomps out of the pumpkin patch, leaving Linus all alone to wait for the great pumpkin. Linus falls asleep waiting, and later that night, Lucy comes to bring him home and tucks him into his warm bed. The next day, Charlie Brown tries to make Linus feel better. Don't take it too hard that the great pumpkin never showed up, he tells his friend. But Linus doesn't feel let down. Just wait until next year, he tells Charlie Brown. I'll find the most sincere pumpkin patch, and I'll sit in that pumpkin patch until the great pumpkin appears. And then there's World War I Flying Ace. And on the back is this fun little drawing there. Snoopy on the... And that is, it's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Well, thank you so much for coming and enjoying this story. I really enjoyed bringing you that story. Been looking forward to reading that for several weeks now. As I get ready to close out the stream, though, I do want to make a couple of announcements. Coming up Monday on I'm Feeling Streamish at 2 p.m., I will be talking about what I'm doing for a Christmas countdown, aka Vlogmas, what I'm doing this year. Looking forward to sharing about that. That is on Monday, the 1st of November. I'll be announcing that on Monday. Also, today I did something with my secondary podcast called Stories with Dean. I renamed it and repurposed it a little bit. It is now the Once Upon a Turkey Leg podcast, and I added this story to the podcast. So this was actually my second time reading the story today. So there is a link in my campsite, my campsite.bio/the turkey leg stir link to the podcast. It's available on Spotify right now, and also the Castbox app or castbox.fm. I will be working to expand it to maybe a couple more platforms with time, but right now it's pretty much primarily on Spotify. So that is the Once Upon a Turkey Leg podcast, and I'll be putting the story onto the podcast that I'm reading each week on this YouTube stream. So it'll be the same story on the podcast as it is on here, because I realize some people may want to listen to the story again, or they might people may not know about the stream. They'll find the podcast and vice versa. So I'm very excited about that. I wanted to kind of reboot that podcast and give it a new identity, and so I finally have. So with that, thank you so much for checking out Once Upon a Turkey Leg. I enjoyed reading It's the Great Pumpkin, and once again we have this fun card. So it's gonna get put away after this weekend. So let's listen to this fun clip again.
I hear the great pumpkin. There he is! There
is. And there's the back. That fun card. Alrighty. Well, this weekend, I hope that you have the sincerest pumpkin patch and that the Great Pumpkin visits you on Halloween night. Or if you go trick-or-treating, I hope that you don't get just rocks. So have a good weekend, have a good one, and see you next time.